Hello and welcome to my channel. Today is the last day of May, so this is my end of month wrap up. I am interested to see in editing how loud the background is because summer has hit here and we have the windows open and the laundry is going, but at least that's behind a door. So we have all the sounds of the street, and I'm not sure how disruptive that's gonna be. So we're gonna find out. Today has mostly been cleaning for me, because tomorrow my husband and I get our first vaccine. Yay! Since generally you don't feel well the day after the vaccine, I'm trying to make sure that I have all my cleaning stuff and everything done beforehand so I don't have to worry about that. I'm honestly probably gonna read a lot the next few days. Anyway, let's get into this. I don't have any books to hold up as I had to return them to the library, so I guess I'll be popping up pictures here. The first book is The Guinevere Deception by Kiersten White. This is a YA fantasy, was published in 2019, and unexpectedly, I gave this a 4.5 out of 5. So I definitely didn't think I was going to like this as much as I did going in. I figured it's just going to be typical YA with an Arthurian twist. However, I really ended up falling in love with the characters, and it just doesn't really make sense, but it worked for me. Anyway, the summary of this book pretty much boils down to that it's an Arthurian story where the real Guinevere actually dies before ever getting to Camelot, and so she is replaced by Merlin's daughter. Magic, however, is completely forbidden in Camelot. It's why Merlin was banished. However, Guinevere's secret might be what actually saves the kingdom. So the characters in this are really what make the story work for me. None of them are one note. They all have their own personalities, and they feel real and interesting to me. It's also interesting to see what twist the author has put on the characters that we know from the legend of King Arthur. I did not know when I picked this up, but this is actually the first book of a trilogy, I believe it is. And the second book is out, and I think the third one either just came out or comes out soon. So I am planning on getting the second one at some point so I can see what happens in the sequel. The only things I really disliked is that there are a few odd scenes that just kind of made me step back and be like, what? And it all really kind of has to do with the characters' ages. Like, King Arthur is 18 in this, and Guinevere is 16, and there's a few things that are revealed about King Arthur's past especially that's just kind of like, how many years ago are we talking? Did this happen, considering how old he is now? And also, I thought the story moved pretty slow. Not a lot actually happens, which is why I think it's the characters that really make this book for me. I definitely think you have to be a fan of King Arthur and that kind of setting with the medieval castle and everything to enjoy this. I found that I'm not really as into YA as I used to be, and I really thought that was going to make me dislike this book, but I still fell in love with it in the end, and I'm interested to see where these characters go in the sequel. Next is a book by an author I have read from before, and that is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This is a contemporary fiction, was published in 2016, and unfortunately I gave this a 2.5 out of 5. So Sayaka Murata is the author of Earthlings, and this is a book I read a month or two ago, and Earthlings is just a bizarre book. It is a crazy ride. So I was kind of expecting something similar with this, although Convenience Store Woman does. However, Convenience Store Woman is a book that was published before Earthlings. The summary of this is just straight from the back of the book kind of thing, because I don't think I could really summarize this on my own. It says, this is the story of 36-year-old Tokyo resident Keiko Furukura. Keiko has never fit in, neither in her family nor in school, but when at the age of 18 she begins working at the Hiromachi branch of Smile Mart, she finds peace and purpose in her life. In the store, unlike anywhere else, she understands the rules of social interaction. Many are laid out line by line in the store's manual, and she does her best to copy the dress, mannerisms, and speech of her colleagues. Wow, I can't read today apparently. Playing the part of a normal person excellently, more or less. Managers come and go, but Keiko stays at the store for 18 years. It's almost hard to tell where the store ends and she begins. Keiko is very happy, but the people close to her, from her family to her coworkers, increasingly pressure her to find a husband and to start a proper career, prompting her to take desperate action. So this book is extremely similar to Earthlings. It talks about a person being like a cog in the machine of life, and just really talks about society's expectations on individuals regardless of what they're good at, their mental state, their physical state, and just whether they're happy or not. However, I felt that Earthlings was a much more fleshed out book than Convenience Store Woman. It kind of feels like the same story, it just goes deeper in Earthlings. Keiko's male counterpart in the story, Shiraha, I absolutely detested him. He was completely insufferable and just felt like he was completely taking advantage of her and manipulating her, and it kind of tanked my enjoyment of the book in the second half. It's really not a long story, and I was really into it in the first half. I actually think Keiko is a very interesting person, and you can really see her love for the convenience store and what she does, and just making the customers happy and doing well for the store. Like, I can appreciate that. Like, I think that's completely fine. And then Shiraha comes in, and it's just like, no, like, please don't ruin this woman's life. So I'll definitely read more of this author's work. I can't remember if she has more than these 2 books or not, but I can definitely tell that Convenience Store Woman comes before Earthlings, just in how it's written and how the story progresses, and with Earthlings just feeling like a more fleshed out version of this book. Next is a book that I just posted a vlog for a little bit ago, and that is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is a horror thriller book. It came out in 2020, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. So I'm also going to read off this summary. It's a condensed version. It is my own summary, but it is still quite long. So in this book, Maggie's family fled their new home in the dead of night when she was only 5 years old. Her father then wrote a terrifying account of their stay called House of Horrors that would launch the house, town, and themselves into the public eye. 25 years later, Maggie's father passes away and leaves her the keys to the house they ran away from all those years ago. She never believed her father's story and has no memories from that time of her life. So she heads to the house to try and find answers to the questions her parents have refused all her life. Once there, activity starts up that mimics what's written in the book. Maggie must work hard to determine what is fact, fiction, and where the line is crossed into being dangerous. So this book is set up in a pretty interesting way, in my opinion. The very first chapter is from the father's book, House of Horrors, and after that it starts chapter 1 of Maggie. And it does that alternating style throughout the entirety of the book, and they end up being very complementary to each other. Usually when something is mentioned in one chapter, then it will be kind of described more, and you'll kind of see where that thought or event comes from in the next chapter, since it'll be from the other point of view. And I thought that just worked very well together to make it feel like a very smooth transition throughout the book. It also really felt like a 2-for-1 deal, and it was multiple genres as well, because the House of Horrors part, Maggie's father's part, it's more of like a traditional ghost story, and then Maggie's point of view is more of like a home invasion type story. And I really liked the different vibes from both sides, because it's all about how they were percepting the activity. So I mostly binged this book in 2 days. The first 50 pages were the only part that like I read separately, and that's because it does start off kind of slow. Like those first 50 pages, she isn't even at the house yet, but shortly after that is when everything starts happening. The ending did feel rushed compared to the rest, and if you are familiar with this type of genre, and this type of horror, then you will definitely see the ending coming. I think you can predict it in the first few chapters, really. I wasn't really a fan of the ending, and it wasn't just because I saw it coming, it's because there were so many fake outs and like red herrings and stuff that it was just too much, and it all happens like so quick. It's just like fake out, fake out, fake out, fake out, true ending, boom, done. And so it was just too much at once, and it just didn't feel the same as the rest of the book. So even with this, I still rated it a 4 just because I loved the journey all the way until just those last few chapters. So it just went way too much into the ridiculous side of things. Like even the House of Horrors part, it just crosses that line from, oh, this is kind of spooky and interesting, to, okay, now this is just straight up ridiculous. So this next book, I'm probably not going to have a lot to say on it because it's an audiobook that I took like 8 months to listen to, and that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is a historical fiction / romance kind of book. It came out in 2019, and I'm just not going to rate it because I can't say what my thoughts were 8 months ago. So trying to kind of put it all together is just, nah, we don't need a rating for this. And because of that, the summary is just straight from Goodreads. Like, there's no way I could remember like half of what happened in this book. So, it's 1917 and World War I is at its zenith when Hazel and James first catch sight of each other at a London party. She's a shy and talented pianist. He's a newly minted soldier with dreams of becoming an architect. When they fall in love, it's immediate and deep, and cut short when James is shipped off to the killing fields. Aubrey Edwards is also headed toward the trenches, a gifted musician who's played Carnegie Hall. He's a member of the 15th New York Infantry, an all-African-American regiment being sent to Europe to help end the Great War. Love is the last thing on his mind, but that's before he meets Colette Fournier, a Belgian chanteuse who's already survived unspeakable tragedy at the hands of the Germans. 30 years after these four lovers' fates collide, the Greek goddess Aphrodite tells their stories to her husband Hephaestus and her lover Ares in a luxe Manhattan hotel room at the height of World War II. She seeks to answer the age-old question, why are love and war eternally drawn to one another? But her quest for a conclusion that will satisfy her jealous husband uncovers a multi-threaded tale of prejudice, trauma, and music, and reveals that war is no match for the power of love. So, that's quite a summary, and yeah, this is told from the different gods' point of view, and for me, listening to this is definitely the best way to do it, because there's several different narrators to represent the gods, and so you're hearing their different voices. And honestly, I think I would have DNF'd this book if I wasn't listening to it on Audible, as besides the voices, there were quite a few moments where they actually had music playing that was appropriate for the scene. And so I thought that just really brought it all together. This is definitely a romance book, which isn't exactly my thing, and I think that's why it took me so long to get through this. I would just lose interest, and to me, the beginning felt really slow. It is insta-love for both of the couples that this follows, so if that isn't your thing, then I'd probably steer clear. It felt pretty meh for me until the last few hours of the audiobook. Then it was like really gripping, and I really wanted to know what the conclusion was going to be. But oh my god, I can't believe it took me that long to finish this. Lastly, I have an ebook that I actually found out about through my friend Lacey. We kind of send some books, like links to books, to each other to try to figure out what we would like to buddy read. And this one is The Fate of Stars by S.D. Simper. This is a fantasy romance, came out in 2020, and I'm also not going to rate this. So before I get into it, I'll read the summary, and then I'll tell you why I'm not going to rate it. So, worlds collide when Talora is kidnapped from her ocean home and forced to be a pet to a tyrannical foreign empire. Her only hope for rescue lies with a sworn enemy, Princess Doriel, infamous for her stone heart and conflicted past. But when Doriel's kingdom comes to the cusp of war, could their uneasy alliance be the key to defeating a common foe, or will their growing feelings for each other lead them to ruin? So, I don't really like this summary. This is the Goodreads summary, this is the Amazon summary, all of that. It doesn't really say what this book is about there, really. This book is very, very problematic. And before I get into it, I am going to list a content warning because you definitely need to know this before going into this book and hearing my thoughts on it. So content warning: toxic relationship, torture, slavery, sexual assault, sexual content, kidnapping, emotional/verbal abuse, confinement, trafficking, animal death, murder, misogyny, religious bigotry, racism, and self-harm. So that's 15 content warnings that I would like to add to this. It does get pretty graphic with some things that made me extremely uncomfortable. And so from this description, it does not tell you that the Princess Doriel, who is the love interest for Talora, the mermaid, she is the one that kidnaps her from the ocean. She is the one that literally ties a rope around her and yanks her out of the ocean and starves her until she gets to the kingdom, and then continues to starve her in the kingdom, where she is confined in a bubble of water. She is pretty much expected to like perform on demand and just kind of like show off for the Empress, who is Doriel's mother. And the mother literally mutilates Talora. She mutilates Talora's mermaid tail, and I felt queasy reading it, and this happens like such early on in the book. I was just really shocked at how graphic it was, and all I could think of is like, how are these two supposed to fall in love? Like, this does not make sense at all. And at one point, there's even a side character who is probably my favorite character in this book, actually. The way she's described sounds exactly like a tiefling from D&D, which is like a human-demon hybrid kind of creature. And this is word for word, a direct quote from this side character in this book. She says, "She is your prisoner. She cannot consent to you. She would reject you at risk of castigation or worse, but should she say yes, it is more likely out of fear than sincerity, given her new duties in this castle. You do not even know her name, because it is all she has left. You and your family have taken everything else. The power imbalance is sickening, and you would be dishonorable to exploit her." So this book is hella self-aware. It is so self-aware that a freaking side character says this to the princess about the mermaid. And I'm just sitting there like, exactly, like, this is insane. And then like right after this, they confess their love to each other. And it's just like, no, like, it's a very, very messed up situation. They should not be together. And what sucks is the actual romance itself was cute. Like, the interactions between them in the romantic way was cute, and I just pretty much had to put everything else that happened out of my mind. And there was a point I almost DNF'd this just because it was going so down the route of being stereotypical in like the slavery sense of when like a female is captured kind of thing, and I was just like, nope, nope, nope. And luckily it veered the other direction right at the last second, but I just have such conflicting feelings about this story, and it's book one of a trilogy. I'm just like, oh my god, because I'm really interested in the world itself, like the politics and the deities they have. Like different countries worship different deities, and these deities are like actually exist, like they actually can like appear to people and pass judgment and talk to people and stuff. And so I thought it was really interesting. So on one hand, there was the world I was interested in, and the romance was cute, but them as a couple was so problematic, and just the graphic things that happened and some things that almost happened, it was just like, whoa. So I'm not rating this because of my conflicted feelings, and I went into it because it was a fantasy lesbian romance, so I was really excited to see that, but yeah, if you are curious and want to read this, I got it as an ebook for like $5. It was on sale, but you are warned. And unfortunately, we're ending on that note because that is the last thing I've read. I'm currently reading The Project by Courtney Summers, and I still have about halfway of that book left to go, so not quite finished with that then. But once again, thank you for hanging out with me. I always appreciate it, and hopefully you ended your month on a better note than I did. If you did enjoy this video, please like and subscribe, as that helps me out a lot. I do apologize if the background noise is really loud. I'm not really gonna be able to hear how that affects the video until I get into editing, so we'll see on that. And until next time, bonne journée and au revoir.